April 2nd, 2023, Dallas, Texas. The championship was already decided. LSU had demolished Iowa 102-85, but in the final seconds, something happened that would change women's basketball forever. Angel Reese walked past Caitlin Clark, waved her hand in front of her face with that "you can't see me" gesture, then pointed to her ring finger. The taunt heard around the world. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Within days, a rivalry was born. Within a year, the WNBA would experience growth nobody thought possible. One game, one moment, everything changed. Nobody predicted this. The 2023 NCAA Women's Championship pulled 9.9 million viewers, the most watched women's college basketball game in history at that time. But it wasn't just the numbers. It was the narrative. It was the controversy. It was two superstars at the peak of their powers creating a storyline that transcended sports. Caitlin Clark, the sharpshooting guard from Iowa who played like she had something to prove every single night. Angel Reese, the dominant forward from LSU who embraced being unapologetically herself. When they collided on the biggest stage, sparks flew in ways nobody anticipated. Clark had carried Iowa through an incredible tournament run. She dropped 30 points in the championship game, doing everything possible to will her team to victory. But Reese and LSU were too much. Reese finished with 15 points and 10 rebounds, controlling the paint and getting LSU's first ever national title. The game itself was competitive until LSU pulled away late. But what happened after the final buzzer turned a great game into a cultural moment. Reese's celebration wasn't subtle. She made sure Clark saw it. The same gesture Clark had used against Louisville in the Elite Eight came right back at her, amplified. Then came the ring finger point, a clear statement about who was getting championship hardware. Social media went nuclear immediately. The word classless trended within minutes. Critics attacked Reese from every angle. But here's where it got complicated. Clark had done the exact same gesture days earlier without facing a fraction of the backlash. The racial dynamics became impossible to ignore. Reese didn't back down. She explained that Clark had disrespected LSU's players in South Carolina earlier in the tournament, and she wasn't going to let that slide. She posted on social media declaring, "I love being a black queen," in all caps. The statement was defiant, unapologetic, raw, and it split the basketball world into camps. Some defended her competitive fire. Others called it poor sportsmanship. But everyone had an opinion, and everyone was talking about women's basketball in ways they never had before. The controversy revealed something bigger than just two players trash-talking. Black women athletes consistently face harsher criticism for behaviors that white athletes get praised for. Commentators pointed this out immediately. When Clark celebrated, she was passionate and competitive. When Reese did the same thing, she was classless and unsportsmanlike. The double standard was glaring. ESPN analysts, former players, and fans argued about it for weeks. The conversation wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about race, gender, and how we judge athletes differently based on who they are. But beneath all the controversy, something remarkable was happening. People who'd never watched women's basketball were suddenly invested. They picked sides. They debated on social media. They waited for the next chapter. The rivalry created stakes that went beyond wins and losses. Every time Clark or Reese played, viewers tuned in hoping for another moment. The engagement was unprecedented. Women's basketball had found its Magic versus Bird, its defining rivalry that would elevate the entire sport. The numbers proved it. Iowa's subsequent games in the 2024 tournament absolutely crushed viewership records. When they faced LSU again in the Elite Eight rematch, 12.3 million people watched, the most viewed women's college basketball game ever at that point. Then came the Final Four against UConn with 14.2 million viewers, breaking that record immediately. The championship game against South Carolina peaked at 24 million viewers. For the first time in history, the women's title game outdrew the men's. The shift was seismic. The WNBA was paying attention. Clark and Reese both declared for the 2024 draft, and the league knew they were sitting on something special. The rivalry that started in college was about to go professional. Indiana selected Clark first overall. Chicago took Reese 7th. They'd face each other 4 times during the regular season, and every game was must-see television. The scheduling wasn't accidental. The league understood exactly what it had. Their first WNBA meeting on June 1st, 2024 became legendary for all the wrong reasons. The Fever won 71-70, but the story was Kennedy Carter's hip check on Clark that sent her sprawling. Angel jumped off the bench appearing to celebrate. The controversy exploded again. Angel refused to talk to media afterward and got fined. The racial dynamics flared up once more. But here's what mattered. 2.25 million people watched that game, the most viewed WNBA contest in over 20 years. The rivalry was printing money. The impact rippled across the entire league. When the Fever played anywhere, attendance spiked. The Sparks, Liberty, Mystics, and Dream all moved home games against Indiana to bigger arenas just to handle demand. Washington's game at Capital One Arena drew 20,711 fans, setting a regular season attendance record. Teams that couldn't fill 5,000 seats suddenly needed NBA venues when Clark came to town. The economic effect was staggering. Indiana went from drawing 4,067 fans per game in 2023 to over 17,000 in 2024. A 300% increase driven almost entirely by one player and the rivalry surrounding her. But it wasn't just Clark. Reese commanded attention too. She broke rebounding records and posted double-doubles at a historic rate. She embraced being the villain, the player willing to be hated if it meant elevating women's basketball. Her podcast launched and immediately gained massive traction. She signed endorsement deals. She became a cultural figure beyond just being an athlete. The rivalry made both of them bigger than they would have been individually. They needed each other, even if neither wanted to admit it. The 2024 WNBA season shattered every metric. Overall attendance increased 48% from the previous year. Total viewership broke records across every network. ESPN, ABC, CBS, ION, NBA TV all recorded their most-watched WNBA games ever, and every single one featured either Clark or Reese. Merchandise sales exploded over 1,000% for Indiana. The league signed a $2.2 billion TV deal, quadrupling their previous agreement. Franchise valuations skyrocketed. Expansion teams paid $250 million just to join. The growth was exponential and unprecedented. The 2025 season opener between Indiana and Chicago drew 2.7 million viewers, the most-watched regular season game in 25 years. The rivalry showed no signs of fading. If anything, it intensified. Clark committed a hard foul on Reese in the third quarter, knocking her to the floor. Reese tried to confront her. The crowd erupted. A flagrant foul was called. Technical fouls followed. The WNBA later investigated hateful comments directed at both players. The ugliness persisted, but so did the attention. People couldn't look away. Critics argue the rivalry is manufactured. They claim the media created something that doesn't exist between two players who respect each other, but the numbers don't lie. Whether real or perceived, the Clark-Reese dynamic drives engagement at levels women's basketball has never seen. The comparison to Magic and Bird isn't hyperbole. That rivalry transformed the NBA in the 80s, lifting the entire league to unprecedented heights. 35 years later, Clark and Reese are doing the same thing for the WNBA. The ripple effects extend beyond just these two players. The attention they generated lifted every other star in the league. Aja Wilson's brilliance got more recognition. Breanna Stewart's championship run in New York drew massive crowds. The league's depth of talent became impossible to ignore. New fans came for Clark and Reese, then stayed for everyone else. The rising tide lifted all boats, exactly as the league hoped. But questions remain about sustainability. Can the WNBA maintain this momentum without Clark? When she missed games due to injury in 2025, viewership dropped significantly. The league's growth feels dangerously dependent on one or two players. What happens when they retire? What happens if injuries derail their careers? The foundation needs to be broader than just a rivalry, no matter how compelling. The league is betting big that the infrastructure they're building now will outlast any individual player. new practice facilities, better travel arrangements, higher salaries through the new CBA negotiations, marketing campaigns that showcase the entire league, not just its biggest stars, expansion into major markets that can sustain teams long term. The goal is creating something that survives and thrives regardless of who's playing. Looking back at that championship game in Dallas, it's clear nobody understood what they were witnessing. A moment of trash talk between two college kids became the spark that ignited a revolution. The controversy, the racial dynamics, the genuine competitive fire, the media attention, the social media debates, all of it combined to create something unprecedented. Women's basketball went from an afterthought to a cultural phenomenon in less than 2 years. The transformation isn't complete. The WNBA still faces challenges. Player pay remains contentious. Some small market teams struggle with attendance. Not every game draws massive viewership. The infrastructure still lags behind men's sports in countless ways. But the trajectory is undeniable. The momentum is real, and it all traces back to April 2nd, 2023, when Angel Reese looked at Caitlin Clark and refused to stay quiet. One game changed everything. One moment created a rivalry that transcended sports. One championship sparked a movement that's still gaining steam. The WNBA will never be the same. Women's basketball will never be overlooked again. And future generations will look back at that night in Dallas as the moment everything shifted, when two players refused to be anything less than exactly who they were, and in doing so, changed the game forever.